everyone. My name is Jessica Frisco. I am the co-chair of Grassroots Action New York, a progressive group here in the city, one of the co-hosts of this event. So first of all, thank you all so much for coming, for getting up 4 hours on a Saturday to fight for single payer. So I first want to turn the mic over to DC 1707, Mark Nyha. He's just going to say a few words of welcome.
Hi, I'm Mark Hanna. I'm Director of Metro New York Healthcare for All. We're a community labor coalition here in the city working for universal healthcare, and we serve on the coordinating committee for the Campaign for New York Health. And we're based here at District Council 1707. They just wanted me to offer you some words of welcome. For those of you who aren't familiar with the council, it's affiliated with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And it represents workers at nonprofit agencies that have city contracts to provide social services such as home care and daycare, Head Start, and mental health services, and so forth like that. So welcome to the space, and I'm here to help you with whatever. I may be popping in and out of the meeting. I'm also doing some work in my office while I'm here too. So thanks for coming, and we're gonna make it happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you again so much to DC 1707 for hosting us here. I also want to recognize a few groups and a few people who helped to organize this whole event. So Physicians for a National Health Program, the Campaign for New York Health, my group Grassroots Action New York, there's Uptown Progressive Action, and New York Progressive Action Network. And I would also just like to ask everyone who's on the planning committee to stand up real quick and be recognized. So we have Katie Robbins, Julie Wagner, Zach Michelson. Okay, and Lane Sedman. So yeah, these people put a lot of hours and work and effort into organizing this for today. So we're really excited that you're all here. I hope it's a worthwhile event. All right, so I'm just going to take a second to walk through the background and the purpose of this meeting. And then I'll run through what we have planned for today's agenda. So all of us in this room, assumingly, have been working on passing the single-payer healthcare plan in New York, the New York Health Act. And a handful of us a couple weeks ago were talking about just how excited we were, all this movement happening over the last couple of months, really increasing awareness of single-payer in New York and getting close to potentially passing it. And we said, because there's so many different groups that are working on it in some capacity, why don't we get them all in the same room together and kind of figure out how we can better coordinate, strategize collectively, and kind of build on the momentum that we've had for the last year. So here we all are today. So you guys all represent leaders of groups from across the city who've been working on single-payer. So this meeting is specifically about passing the New York Health Act. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that it's for the state level. As much as we want federal Medicare for all, today we're just talking about state level single payer. And it's through the state legislature. Okay, so some of the things that we wanted to get out of this meeting today. We're going to kind of do an overview of the current landscape, where we're at today, kind of how we've gotten to this point. Identify what has been successful so far, what different groups have been doing, share some of the things that have worked, some things that we can improve on, identify the gaps, where we need more resources, and then most importantly, to build relationships with each other. So there's a lot of leaders of different groups from across the city here, and some of you might be working in the same neighborhoods, the same boroughs, and not know it. So we have a few things planned throughout the day that we're really hoping to foster relationships between different groups so you guys can work more collaboratively together. And then, of course, to discuss strategy and kind of pull everything together. We're going to have a few panels about key constituencies and certain tactics that groups have been using. And at the end of the meeting, we're going to kind of bring it all together, figure out how we can move forward and lay out a strategy for the year ahead. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is, so this meeting's not focused on the policy intricacies of the Health Act. It's really a strategy meeting. However, we do recognize that throughout the event today, there might be some questions that come up about policy issues with the bill. So we have someone here today, Len. Henry, sorry, he's not here yet. Henry, so do you want to stand up? So Henry is the policy resource for today, and so if you guys have any questions about policies related to the bill, you can raise your hand and he'll come over and do his best to answer them. So hopefully you guys all have a copy of the agenda or have seen it, but this is what we have planned for you today. So we're going to do some introductions. We're going to go through and hear which groups you're all representing. Then Katie is going to go over the current landscape of the New York Health Act, what we've kind of done to date, what the status is on different elected officials, on different groups throughout the movement. Then we're going to have our first breakout group. So this is going to be broken up by district, and you can see in the four corners of the room, we have 4 different geographic areas identified, and so we're going to split up based on those areas. So you guys can all get to know each other a little bit better and talk about strategy and kind of priorities for your area. Then we have our first panel, and the panel is going to be key constituencies. So we have a handful of people who are representing different viewpoints. We're going to talk about concerns or issues or selling points of the New York Health Act for those groups. Halfway through, we're going to take a break, and we have some refreshments here for you all. And then when we reconvene, we're going to have our second panel on tactics. And so we're kind of just going to go through a menu of what different groups have been doing over the course of the last year and more to push for this bill. And then following that, we're going to break out into the same geographic district groups and kind of pull everything together based on what we learned in the panels and figure out how we can make a more cohesive strategy with the things that we discussed. Okay, so now I'll turn it over to Katie Robbins, and Katie's with Physicians for a National Health Program, and she's just going to go over,
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. From what I understand, this should work. Hello. I think so. Is this working? Yeah. And I just want everyone to we have time to do quick introductions. So name and group is what folks have on the planning team want. So we want to get through the room and see who's here. But again, it's just name and group, okay? Can you pick up?
Julie, Uptown Progressive Action.
Can people stand up and face
Yeah,
backwards?
can you stand up so folks can see you?
Everybody in the front row, and then just pass it along.
Okay, great. Full names, Martha says. Full names and group.
Martha Livingston, Physicians for National Health Program, and also New York State United Teachers.
Hi, I'm Mike Schweinsberg, 504 Democratic Club and Progressive Action for Lower Manhattan.
Ellen Colby, Roosevelt Island Coalition, and trying to get the geriatric care managers on board.
Holly Beam, GOBK, and Good Neighbors of Park Slope.
Joyce Jed, Good Neighbors of Park Slope.
Jaime Torres, Latinos for Healthcare Equity.
I'm Max Adler from the New York Immigration.
Social workers for single payer. Barbara Estrada, Northwest Bronx Indivisible.
Helen Krim, Women's March Alliance.
Mariana Pineda, started with Long Island activists, worked with the Long Island Progressive Coalition, and now the newly formed Suffolk County DSA chapter.
Ben Gross, League of Women Voters, Westchester.
Steve Todd from the New York State Nurses Association with Campaign for New York Health.
Sean Petty, staff nurse, New York State Nurses Association.
Jessica Frisco, Grassroots Action New York.
Hi, I'm Claire Natali. I'm from a newly formed student nursing group at SUNY Downstate.
Kristen Burns, SWAG, which is Sunnyside Woodside Action Group.
Amlin Gray, Concerned Families of Westchester.
Hi, Elizabeth Adams, Planned Parenthood of New York City.
Lindsay Rosenthal, PNHP, Hudson Valley Progression Action Network, and Westchester Indivisible.
Henry Moss again, PNHP.
Charlotte Adamus, I'm from the Older People for Justice and Democracy in Mid-Hudson Valley.
Katerina Misarovich, I'm from PEER, Progressive East End Reformers. Thank you. I'm Penny Crane, I'm the last PNHP Metro member and hopefully renewed as of today, and DSA.
Ethan Felder, I'm a union side labor lawyer and co-founder of the Clean Solidarity Coalition.
Ruta Ray, Physicians for National Health Plan, and DSA, Democratic Socialist Center.
Nick Colson from the DAPT.
Maria Alvarez from New York Statewide Senior Action Council and Brooklyn-wide Interagency Council on Aging.
Rachel Matthew from Manhattan Young Democrats.
Morgan Moore, Heal New York, which is a subgroup that organized Brooklyn.
Oh, did we skip this?
the row.
Okay, sorry.
Jen James from the Socialist Feminists of DSA.
Marion Yoon, State Senate District 17 for Progress.
John Highland, Professional Staff Congress and Council of Municipal Retiree Organizations.
Jim Perlstein, Professional Staff Congress.
Chia Nunwa from the Socialist Feminists of DSA.
Rebecca Hollis from LIC Coalition.
Juliet Uccelli, member of Progressive Action Lower Manhattan and UFG. Eileen Bardell, Peace Action Staten Island.
Richenda Kramer, Peace Action Staten Island and Raging Grannies.
Hi, my name is Bobby Score. I'm with the local one of the I-8DSE, State Change Union.
I'm Ken Ashell. I wish I was part of the Region Grade. I'm from Black Lives Matter, Greater New York.
I'm Stephen Cicchini, Long Island activist and New York Progressive Action Network.
And Tom Thomas from Grey Panthers.
Hi, Judy Estequest, Grey Panthers, and I'm also in District 7, which is Long Island, so a bunch of indivisibles and Labor Women voters there.
Jeff Michelson from Grassroots Action New York.
Hey, I'm Lane Koshu, Socialist Feminist DSA and Campaign for New York Health.
Okay, I think we got everyone. Thank you. As you heard from the introductions, we are serious about the downstate region being represented today. So we have folks from the Hudson Valley, from Long Island, from every borough in Manhattan, or in New York City, and that is a really new and exciting development for our movement. So I think we should just give ourselves a round of applause. Not to say there isn't more work to do to make sure that we are really truly representing a movement of New York State, but I think this is a really great start. We are, I think, about a century into the struggle for universal guaranteed health care, frankly. A little over, depending on how you start keeping track of this, but you know, frankly, we know that we are rooted in a long, protracted struggle for this here in the United States of America, and I'm only spending a little bit on the history just to kind of get us thinking about this. You know, proposals for national health insurance go back to FDR. Before that, we have, over this period of time, had very significant wins in terms of our social insurance programs in the United States. Obviously, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid were one when there was significant movement on the ground. I mean, there's lots of ways to look at this question, but it is when there is movement that we have opportunities to really move forward as a society. And even in recent history, the last couple of decades, there's a young Dick Godfrey pictured here, and he's been introducing this bill every year since 1993, the New York Health Act. We have John Conyers, a Democrat from Michigan, who's been introducing the national HR 676 Medicare for All bill since 2005. 2003, Martha corrects me. My fact checker in the front row. We have essentially, stalwarts in elected office who have recognized a moment will come when this can be a serious part of the debate on the state and national level. And when we talk about movement and jump ahead to recent times, there has been incredible momentum from the left since January. These gorgeous mobilizations, hundreds of thousands of people marching, largely in opposition to the Trump agenda, but our experience as organizers for single-payer universal health care is that there has been a huge increase of people who wanted to get involved on this issue as well as threats to Medicaid and the insurance plans offered through the marketplace. Even though we know we have a huge uninsured population and these private health insurance plans are largely inadequate, people are fighting for what we have access to, and there was incredibly brave actions that took place in just the last couple of months to completely stop Trump and the Republicans' agenda on health care. I know people in this room were arrested, taking over people's offices in Congress. I know many people in the room have been part of that specific campaign to stop the threats to the current programs that exist. But during all of that period, we've had a tremendous surge on what the real goal is for universal public guaranteed health care, be it through the Medicare for All Act or for the New York Health Act here in New York State. So grassroots support for this issue has been surging. This was a march just earlier this year led by National Nurses United in partnership with the Single Payer Strategy Group, meeting that took place in New York City, sponsored by Healthcare Now. We've had a little help from our friends, frankly, on this. I know there's a lot of folks here who worked really hard on Bernie's campaign. And the movement is, frankly, I've been working on this for about 10 years, and the movement is starting to look a little different than it has throughout that whole time. We have people who are younger, and it's really interesting to me that as we see this shift in sort of demographics that are getting involved, breaking down some of the narrative that, that this issue really does affect us all. We all have a stake in it, and thinking about what that is important because it's life or death. And you know what? This movement is causing prominent folks to take notice. And as you may have heard in Congress, HR 676 has reached the highest number of co-sponsors it's ever had. We have a majority of Democrats signed on, 116 total at this point, the highest in all of history. And then the headlines, every couple weeks there's a new prominent, public figure coming out for it. So we had Elizabeth Warren and Al Gore and even Warren Buffett, pretty unexpected developments, frankly. Our senators here in New York have been vocally supportive of single payer. I mean, this is all about responding to the tremendous movement that people like the folks in the room have helped create. There's no illusion that we're going to be able to get this Republican Congress to pass a Medicare for All bill, and that's not really the point. What we're experiencing is a complete shift in what is within the reasonable frame of debate. And even a few years ago, you would hear everything's on the table except single-payer health care. But now, even now we are seeing that single payer is indeed a credible policy position. Here in New York State, many folks think that we have a huge opportunity. We have a state where there's a very progressive narrative about the policies we adopt. The Democratic leadership here is very much in opposition to the Trump agenda. And I'll talk a little more about the work we've done specifically on the New York Health Act. But it's important for folks to note that in 2014, a group came together called the Campaign for New York Health, a statewide coalition founded on the principle that healthcare is a human right, and that every resident of New York should have access to care. Folks at the table when it was first founded included PNHP, the New York State Nurses Association, many of our allies, and we had very key principles. It wasn't just about pushing one bill, but actually having a healthcare system that is truly universal. That means it covers everyone, including all residents, regardless of immigration status, that it's comprehensive, that it covers medically necessary care, and yes, that includes abortion and contraception and long-term care and vision and dental, that it's an equitable system. We currently have some tiered access to care, and we see that in the outcomes. We want transparency and accountability into our system, and we want meaningful participation from the people who use it. The Campaign for New York Health in 2014, working with Dick Gottfried, launched a series of hearings throughout the state. We had hundreds of people come out and testify at these hearings from all over to the importance of the New York Health Act. In 2015, we released an economic impact study. I'm sure many of you have seen the summaries in your packets, showing that we can indeed have universal guaranteed health care. We can save a tremendous amount of money to the tune of billions of dollars. It's not going to kill jobs. Doctors will not flee the state. Reimbursement rates do not get cut. Countering all of the propaganda we hear. And when after all that movement and a little bit of research, the New York Health Act passed the Assembly for the first time in 20 years with huge majority support. In 2016, the coalition continued to grow. We had more attention from businesses. 200 businesses have signed on to support the New York Health Act in the last year. The bill passed again in 2016. And the Campaign for New York Health very concertedly started a base building campaign. Many of you have been involved with collecting our New York Health Act postcards all over the city and the state. And then that brings us to 2017, where support has surged with the attacks on healthcare. The bill passed for the third year in a row, and we have won support from exactly half of the New York State Senate. It's a truly statewide movement. We have an upstate organizer who coordinates the activism upstate, and we have a real commitment to doing not just this kind of coalition building, but true grassroots organizing and base building. Is there a question?
Could you talk a little bit about those stories that have been in the paper the last 2 days about Jeffrey Cooley and his persons?
So if you didn't hear, he's asking about the stories in the paper about Klein and Andrea Stewart Cousins, and I personally don't feel like I'm the best person to talk about that. But there will be time in the breakout groups for sure if your questions are answered here. Here's a headline in The Guardian. It was nice to get some mainstream media coverage for our work, even if it was across the pond. The headline was "Universal Healthcare Supporters See Their Chance." There's never been more support. This was a photo of our rally in April of 2017, where over 500 people from all over the state attended to lobby Albany. But even with as much momentum as we have made, this might jump out as heavy a little bit straight. What are we looking at here? I was just trying to think about how do we talk about yes, we have half of the Senate on board, but this is not just like a hop, skip, and a jump away. This is more symbolic of the journey that we have ahead of us. This is not going to be a simple thing to get to through the Senate and to the governor's desk.
Couldn't you have done like the Brooklyn Bridge?
I should have called you and asked you for your advice, Martha. That's what I can remember. And because of our success, though, the opposition is becoming more visible. Here's a mailer in Senator Valesky's district from Reclaim New York. It says Obamacare on steroids, your taxes could quadruple. And who is Reclaim New York? I just want folks to know. They are literally funded by the Mercer family, connected to Breitbart News, connected to big insurance, connected to big pharma. Like, this is actually a great mapping from Little Sis, a group that sort of play on Big Brother. Little Sis that maps like these kind of power relationships. So it's literally Trump and his friends that we are fighting right now. So I think that's important to know. A question in the back?
Yes, will these slides be made available?
Yeah, you
Thank
got it. We will make these slides available. We don't have time for this video. It's from the National Republican Committee out in California. They have this, 1-minute video that's all gloom and doom, black and white pictures of Democratic, representatives talking about single payer, calling it a European-style single payer healthcare program that they're trying to pass in California. So we are fighting the folks who are really up against us, but not even just the obvious enemy and the right and the people who are ideologically opposed to the system because they make a ton of money from the system as it is. But also, frankly, we have a wing of the liberal establishment like Paul Krugman and others who are really ready to just say at any time that fighting for single payer or Medicare for all is a waste of time. So let's be real about what our opposition looks like. And how will we respond to this historic moment? We at the Campaign for New York Health think it's incredibly important that we all recognize our stake in this and that we feel comfortable talking about how the system impacts us, telling our stories. There will be some projects talking about that. Later today, here's a photo of Emily McNeil of the Labor Religion Coalition doing a speak out with the faith leaders, talking about their stake in this. Telling our stories is really, really important. Building the base. We're going to talk more about what we mean by that, getting the people most impacted by this dysfunctional system to be at the front of our work. Here's Kim, an amazing nurse activist with the postcards. We've developed a few more tools, like a specific healthcare survey to go out and talk to people in our communities. Basically, we are going to get organized and change what is politically possible. That's how we are going to respond to this moment. And we really don't have a choice. So we have to save our democracy. Jessica, I'm going to hand it over to you for this next portion.
Thank you so much.
It's sitting right next to the
So I'm going to give a really quick civics lesson about the pathway from this bill to becoming a law. So there's two chambers in the New York State Legislature. There's the Assembly and the Senate. And the steps for the bill to go through is it has to be introduced in both chambers. Then it has to go through the Health Committee in both the Senate and Assembly. Then it has to be put on the calendar to bring it to the floor. And then it needs a majority of both senators and assembly members to vote yes on it. And once it passes both chambers, it goes to the governor. The governor has to sign it, and then it becomes a law. So the check marks here are things that have already happened. So it's fully passed the assembly, as Katie said, for the last 3 years. And the real block is in the Senate right now. So it's been introduced in the Senate. And it's gone to committee, but it hasn't come out of committee, it hasn't been introduced on the floor to be debated and to be voted on. And then our next big block will be going to the governor and having him sign it. Yeah.
Is the healthcare committee the only committee it needs to go through, or is there more than one?
It depends on the time of year, but it would be health and finance in the Senate, and then at some point it switches to just the rules committee, which is basically planning.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the key, do you have a question?
Yeah, in some places the comptroller's office or someone make a financial analysis of the bill so that money is appropriated?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, they are supposed to work that out in committee, but unfortunately we don't have like the equivalent of a CBO in New York State.
So it would be the finance committee that has to pass a rule on it?
Yeah.
Do they have accountants look at it in any point?
Yes.
Yes, in the finance committee.
Okay, so the two Assembly and the Senate. And here we have Ken Hannon, who is the chair of the Health Committee, and John Flanagan, who's the Senate Majority Leader. So these two people are really the ones who kind of have stopped it from moving through the Senate. So as I said, it goes to the Senate and then has to go through the committee. So this is the guy who would allow it to go through the committee, and he kind of chairs the 12 other senators who are part of that committee. And then John Flanagan has to actually bring it to the floor, put it on the calendar, and get it to debate in the Senate.
Is it possible if it makes it through the committee that Flanagan could still be able to bring it to the floor?
Yeah. Yep, so we need both of these people to be on board. And obviously, if we get more senators in support of it, then they'll, mount pressure on them to actually push it through committee. But right now, they have the capacity to stop it with that.
Isn't there a rule that if we get 30 sponsors, that it can skip health and finance and go right to the floor for any reason, or?
I believe there's something like that, but we are not close to the yet. Okay, so then we have these three senators who we've kind of identified as key players, potential senators who we would move. So the first one is Simca Felder. I put quotations around the D because he does not typically vote for Democrats, although he is a Democrat. So he is in South Brooklyn. He was the one Democrat who did not sign on to the New York Health Act as a co-sponsor this year. And there were a lot of groups that tried to mount pressure on him, but he has not come out in favor of it yet. Then there's, so Phil Boyle is a senator who's out on Long Island, and he is opposed to it. However, he's going to be running for, I think, sheriff. Yeah, sheriff out in Long Island at the end of this year in November. So the interesting thing about this district is we just had a victory for Christine Pellegrino, who won assembly seat out there. And it was actually a Republican assembly district. She was a Democrat, she was a Bernie delegate, she was super progressive, and she was on the Working Families Party line, and she actually flipped the district, which is awesome. And her assembly district is fully within his Senate district. So we think if there is going to be, a district that we could potentially flip from Republican to Democrat, this would be it. And so there's going to be a special election if he wins the sheriff seat. The election will be sometime next spring. So that's kind of a district to keep an eye on. And then we have Marty Golden, and he's a Republican, but he has a high percentage of Democrats in his district. And we think that of all the Republicans, he might be the one who would keep to pressure to support this bill. And then we have the IDC, who we all love. So the IDC is the Independent Democratic Caucus. They're elected as Democrats, but they caucus with the Republicans. And they're actually the group that's keeping us from having a Democratic majority in the Senate. So there's been a lot of pressure over the last couple of months and years to push the IDC to join the Democrats and have a true Democratic majority. And if that happened, then we would have a Democratic speaker in the Senate and also a Democrat chairing the Health Committee. So if we keep up pressure on the IDC and they join the Democrats, then that would give us a lot more momentum as far as those two seats.
Couple of questions.
So Cuomo has not come out in support of this. He hasn't been opposed to it either, but he's really the one who could, push this forward if he supported it. We think he might be running for president in 2020. He's taking on all these progressive positions on certain things, so he could potentially be championing for this bill if he wanted to be. But he's another person that we kind of have to keep in mind as we push this bill.
Should we take a few questions? I saw some hands go up.
Sure. So questions? Yeah.
On the Felder's photo, you have opposed, and I get what he's saying. There are a number of people in my district who met with him. And he kind of said, now this is paraphrase because I wasn't there were at least 2 meetings. I really don't know that much about it. There hasn't been much discussion. I'm waiting for analysis. So he's not saying he's opposed. So you might want to
Yeah,
rephrase
he's
that.
undeclared as of now.
Yeah, it might be better because what we say matters, because when we say we oppose, that casts him solid. Because I'm from his district, we want to make it happen.
Yeah, it'll be the 35th. Yeah.
I'd also like to say, Phil Boyle's district is going to be an open seat, but we also on Long Island, we have Senator Marcelino and Senator Phillips, who each won their district by less than 1% and 2%, and those are applicable districts too. So, I just wanted to put that out
Great,
there.
we'll add that to the slideshow too, so that people can have a record. Yeah.
Over the weekend, I met with an organizer up in Ithaca who said, we have flooded O'Mara's office with stories. He knows all the stories. He's just not interested. He's in the pocket of big business, of the insurance companies. He's not going to flip no matter what we do. So I wonder what use is it, almost any use, to tell stories to these, to bring people into the offices.
Let's talk
Is
about
there some
this in the
other
breakout
thing
groups.
to be done as well,
Yeah.
to convince them? I mean, I don't know that the individuals telling stories anymore is, I'm assuming that people have been talking to their senators individually for it, so maybe you can.
Yeah, this is exactly what the next step, the breakout group, is going to allow us space to talk about. What are the tactics that make sense to move forward? So sorry to jump in. I just wanted to make sure if there were any other questions specifically about this. Helen, I'm going to hold the mic while you speak. I'll hold it.
Quite a number of people mentioned that they were with DSA, and I have no idea what they're talking about.
Oh, hey! Actually, Mariana is closer. DSA.
Democratic Socialists of America.
The Bernie Sanders group.
Yeah, right on. Is there any other questions about this specific topic at hand?
Uh-oh, indoctrination.
Okay. Jessica, you want to introduce the next step?
Okay, so next thing on the agenda is we are going to split up by district, as I mentioned earlier. So you can see the four corners of the room. We have Bronx and Hudson Valley. We have Manhattan back there. We have Brooklyn and Staten Island, and we have Queens and Long Island over there. We kind of looked at which groups were from which areas, and we think it'll be a pretty even split. There's facilitators who are identified for each group. Facilitators, do you guys want to raise your hands? Okay, great. So these are the people who are kind of going to be leading the breakout groups, pushing the agenda along. And so what we're really trying to get out of this first breakout group is first to get to know each other. So you're going to be sitting with people who are working in your area. You may know them, you may not, but it's really important to make connections and hear from other people about what they've been doing and develop those relationships. Yeah.
Are you people divide based on your own constituent district or based on your organization?
Great question. This is a self-selecting process. So you have to have that question with yourself. Where do you think you would make most of an impact, either by your organization or where you want to do organizing? I know people travel from Manhattan to Brooklyn all the time. So it's self-selected which group you want to plug into. And one more note, like we said, we have a few policy resources in the room. And Len Rodberg, Len, would you mind standing up? Len is here and can answer any questions as well as Henry. So, all right, enjoy the breakout groups.
So folks, I'm really excited about this panel because here's the thing. We are all in this together. There are people in this room I've never met before, and I've been doing this stuff for 25 years, and there's some people who've been doing it longer, and it is just so exciting. I'm actually seriously really excited about the possibilities here. But we really need to keep our eyes on the prize, not lose sight of what we are after and who the enemy is. I think that's really key, and that's why this panel is so important, because we're different. I'm not you, you're not me. We have different issues in lots of ways about things that we do and how we go about our lives and where we are placed in our society. But we know two things. We are the 99%, and the way that we win, because we don't have the big bucks, the way that we win is to remember that we're all in this together, and the only way we don't win is when they divide us and conquer us. It has always been thus, and this is what we're about. So just before we get started and talk about our different constituencies, I just wanted to remind us about something. Okay, so everybody's nice sitting comfortably in their chair, and here's what I want you to do. I'm serious. Can you stand up for a minute, those of you who can? Okay. Fight, fight, fight! Healthcare is a right!
Fight, fight, fight!
Healthcare is a right! Fight, fight, fight! Healthcare is a right! One more. Fight, fight, fight! Healthcare is a right! Thank you. Just a gentle reminder why we came today. So, our first speaker, just in that vein, I can think of nobody better to start us off than our wonderful colleague and union sister, Judy Sheridan-Gonzalez, who is the president of the 40,000-member New York State Nurses United. So, I'm sorry, I just screwed that up. It's right in front of my face, isn't it? Because I never meet good people, so. And the thing about how Judy got to be president is that there was a dissident movement within NYSNA, and they won. And they won because they spoke truth to power, and they really have transformed the union, and NYSNA has been a leader on this and a number of other progressive issues ever since this caucus took over. Judy and I have been in the same room together fighting this fight. We're also active in labor together fighting those fights, and it is my great privilege and honor to introduce Judy Sheridan-Gonzalez.
Everybody. So I was asked to speak about the challenge of getting unions on board and how we function as unions. Particularly I can speak about healthcare unions, but all unions, some of the challenges that we face as union leaders and as unions fighting this battle. As many of you may know, the history of how unions have dealt with healthcare, the origin of the our sort of sordid past was after World War II, when European unions embraced the concept of universal health care on a national level. Unfortunately, the unions in the United States, for a variety of reasons, didn't do that. They saw utilizing the concept of health benefits as a pull-in to get to organize people, and we've sold out the public, the external to unions around that issue, and that still kind of is out there. Many of our conversations, as NYSNA has been championing this issue for a while, our conversations with other unions, the challenges have been directly posed to us. Well, you know, what's going to make people want to be in the union if that's not something that we provide? If we don't provide, if the government provides health care benefits for members, why would they want to join our union? And of course, our response, and I think something that unions are really having to look at much more, is if members feel engaged in the union, if the union is fighting on the shop floor and has a broader social justice kind of a vision, then members will still embrace the union, even if the union directly isn't responsible for negotiating health benefits. So that's kind of our biggest challenge, I think, with getting unions on board. What we've tried to do in speaking to members about this and speaking to other union leaders about this is to very concretely synthesize, well, you know, when people say, well, I already get health benefits, I work for a big employer, or my union negotiates my health benefits, why should I pay more taxes? Because there is going to be a tax impact. And we've broken that down for people. You know, when you negotiate a contract or if your employer is providing health benefits, there's a cost to it. Because as union negotiators, we cost out packages. When we make a contract, you know, we add the raises, what the pension costs, and the cost of health benefits, which come sometimes to $20,000 a year for family benefits. So we've explained to people that that $20,000 a year that's in your package actually, part of that would go into your salary or to other benefits. Then there's premiums, and there's co-pays, and there's co-insurance, and there's out-of-pocket, and there's prescription payments, and all these other things that people are paying for their health care. So that's actually been very good to explain that to people when we break down the cost, because people think, well, I don't pay anything now, and I'm going to have to pay something. I just pay a little premium now, and then I'm going to have to pay something. So that's one of the tactics that we've used to educate people about the cost, because everybody's concerned about money. The other issue is we think that it's very important. Unions are, I don't know if people are aware of the statistics, we have 35% of the workforce 45 years ago, now under 10%, 7% in the private sector, about 11 or 12% in the public sector, and public sector unions are under attack. So certainly everyone in this country is not in a union, but unions still have a lot of power. And we are trying to promote the vision that to survive as a union, it's incredibly important to combine with our communities, to have a community labor alliance, and healthcare is the perfect conduit in which to do that. And we were very successful in our last several campaigns, not the last one, but big contract campaign that occurred maybe 8 years ago, where our pension and benefits were under attack in our nurses union. We have many of us in certainly downstate area have pretty good health benefits. And that was a key issue aside from community issues such as staffing and care among our population. So the word was, well, the community's not going to support you going on strike for your health benefits. They don't have anything. How are you going to do that? And we were able to explain to our members that the health benefits that we have is something that everyone should have. That just because you're in a union and you have a better benefit, whether it's a pension or a health care benefit, the fight should not be say, oh, I'm a nurse, I'm a caregiver, shouldn't I have health care? It's my community should get health care. And people really did believe that after a while. And we had so much community support that we said, well, we're in a strategic sector. We can fight for this. If we can fight for this and we can win this, then we can all fight together for you. And we had incredible community support for that particular demand based on the fact that the level of consciousness of our members, and all the members out of the picket lines, we weren't on strike, but we had a lot of pickets, that was ingrained in everybody. And so that we made that connection, which didn't exist 10 years ago. That was a process of education of our members and explaining that alliance. So the concept of the Community Labor Alliance and the concept of unions having investment in our broader community was really critical for the work that we did. Now, what's unfortunate is, we have these sort of tactical alliances now in fighting back against the ACA and the cuts with some of our employers. And as you may know, when you're in a union and you have an employer, there's this sort of never-ending battle. There's always a sort of a little war going on. And now we have this tactical alliance in fighting back against the cuts. And, our position is that, that's okay. We can fight against the ACA, we can fight against cuts, we can fight for safety net, but we have to keep in mind that there's a bigger picture out there and a bigger prize out there, and it's a temporary alliance, because we know that our employers will turn on us, and some of the private hospitals are less supportive of Medicare for all, because as was said, the reimbursement rates are higher when you have a private payer mix, and they're afraid that they're going to actually lose money, and that's a challenge for us. And that's why you have somebody like Dowling for the Northwell system, which has a lot of private payers, not supporting single payer, and my CEO at Montefiore saying he supports it, but again, that's always an issue. Wrap it up. So the way we've dealt with a lot of the issues is we're trying to form these alliances. We have these town halls that we're starting to put together and that we have put together, which combine the two groups, building coalitions, but also doing popular education based on this kind of Sesame Street mentality that everyone has, where they have to be entertained. We find that people don't read very much. So we've tried to put together videos and PowerPoints and things like that that can organize people, and also go out everywhere we can, speak everywhere we can, share everywhere we can, and have our members armed with this information all across the state. And that's, I think, been the most effective way, aside from all the lobbying and other things that we've done, is just having member to member and member to community grassroots organizing. That's it.
As somebody whose union is not really 100% behind this, even though they've endorsed it, I want to say NYSNA's work has been really exemplary. I also want to recognize Bobby Score, who's in the House, who is the corresponding secretary IATSE,
I record and I correspond.
you record and you correspond. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Bob Skort is, works with IATSE, that's the Stagehands Local 1, but has been involved nationally in getting not only the stagehands, but getting labor to really understand this issue for well over 10 years. And it's our privilege that you're in the House, so I wanted to recognize you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. Next up, I'd like to introduce Maria Alvarez, who is the Executive Director of New York Statewide Senior Action Council and Brooklyn-wide Interagency Council for the Aging. She oversees these two organizations that advocate for improved quality of life for New York State's elders and their families. She's done lots of wonderful things, which I'm not going to elaborate on. She holds a bachelor's degree from Marquette University and a master's from the New School, where she was a Sloan Fellow. And it's our honor to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. No, this is great. And I recognize a lot of the groups and members here and everything. And I was asked to talk a little bit about the senior issues regarding the New York Health Care Act, because a lot of people, will say, well, they're on Medicare. Seniors are on Medicare. So why do they even care about, about a single payer? They're covered. Well, one thing is that, have you ever heard of anybody saying, oh no, I'm going to turn 65 and now I have to be on Medicare? Right? Never, right? Usually it's, oh great, I'm going to be 65 and I'm going to be covered and I'll have portability with my insurance. They'll accept all my pre-existing conditions, and it won't be as costly. And those are changing. But when you ask our members, we have members all over the state, and our board is consumer directed and governed. So they're the ones that lead our, what we work on. They will say, it's for me, yes, we want a strong and improved Medicare, but also because I want my children and my grandchildren to be able to enjoy what I am enjoying today. And their children and grandchildren, frankly, are paying into it now too, so they should be able to reap the same rewards. However, there's one reality that's affecting seniors right now in New York State. Behind housing costs, healthcare is the second largest amount of expenses that seniors pay in New York State every month during their, when they spend money. It takes about anywhere between 15 and 20% of their monthly, not their budget, because everybody has different incomes, but what they're spending is on an average of 15 to 20%, depending on whether they're homeowners or non-homeowners or single couples. But that's if your health care is good, right? Once your health care starts deteriorating and you need more care, and then it can triple. It could be a lot more expensive. And if that older New Yorker requires more services, the average cost of a nursing home in New York State is $135,000 a year. If the senior decides that they want to stay home, live at home, unless he or she is impoverished or does not have family to care for them, the government provides little assistance. And that's a direct quote from Dr. Henry Moss, who he's a member of PNHP, but he's also a member of statewide. So, Katie, I'm sharing. We fight over him. No. But he actually, I don't know if you've ever read his book, The 2030 Caregiving Crisis. It's an excellent book. It really talks about long-term care and what New Yorkers will be facing by the year 2030, and I would encourage everybody here to buy it and ask him how to get a hold of it. It's very, it's a very good book, and it explains everything very, very, very thoroughly. But he also spoke in front of the 4 committees in the Assembly when we were talking about the home care crisis, because what we're finding is that there's not a lot, that there's a lack of home care providers for the growing number of seniors and disabled people in New York State. So, but some of the things that he said in his testimony was that, government quietly relies on unpaid caregivers, families, and friends to provide the lion's share of care to both older and younger disabled adults. The New Yorkers, families are providing a lot of the services that should be part of a healthcare system. As a matter of fact, it's to the tune of $31 billion in unreimbursed, if they were to reimburse them at a $13 an hour rate. There's a few reasons for that. Age dependency, we have less, we're having less children, and people are living longer, so when they live in their 80s and 90s and require more assistance, there are going to be less people to take care of them, the families, yes. And then another factor is that we've realized that the income of the elders is not keeping pace with the cost of living. So one thing that's not being talked about is that while you could qualify for Medicare, a lot of people cannot afford a lot of the costs associated with Medicare. So, for example, out of the 2.6 million seniors 65 and over in New York State, 20%, 575,000 seniors, get what we call extra help, which is a government subsidy paid through Medicaid so that they can pay for their co-payments, Part B premiums, and any other out-of-pocket costs. So one thing is to qualify for Medicare and remember that, and the other is to be able to afford it. Medicaid pays for much of the long-term care and nursing home costs for older New Yorkers. 6 million children, persons with disabilities, and elders and Medicare beneficiaries benefit from Medicaid. On the other hand, if we had a New York Health Act, seniors wouldn't have to pay those Part B premiums. If they're now in traditional Medicare, they won't have to live with Medicare making them pay hefty copays. No one would need a Medigap policy because New York Health would provide complete coverage, no deductibles, copays, restricted network, or out-of-network charges. They'll have 100% drug coverage, 100% dental and vision coverage, which is huge for seniors because that's hardly covered under Medicare or Medicaid. If they're now on Medicare Advantage, that would, the New York Health Act would supersede that, so they wouldn't even need another plan. I'm almost done. We've been a proponent of this. This is our 45th year. We've been a proponent of single payer ever since we started. And our report shows that 59%, we have an elder economic security report that shows that 59% of seniors in New York State are not making ends meet. We know that, we hear about the federal poverty level and all of that. That doesn't really reflect reality. We know that New York State is more expensive to live in than any other place, than most any other place. So the New York Health Act is a logical and humane law that most seniors recognize as beneficial and necessary for their continued quality of life and indispensable for the future of their children and grandchildren. So thank you.
Next up is Ken Shelton. Kenneth Shelton is a leader in the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically in Queens. I've gotten to know him and hear him speak because we've been involved in Queens actions together, and it's my great pleasure to introduce him. He is actually a rising senior at St. John's in Queens, and has also been involved in the, let me get it right, because I blew nice, the campaign to shut down Rikers and all of the related activities.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for having me. I'm honored. First and foremost, I don't speak for all people of color, so. But really, I want to start with the question. So, for how many of you, raise your hand if the Affordable Care Act actually works for you? Like even a little bit, raise your hand. And raise your hand if that's like your preferred plan to have, like for healthcare. No, the answer is no. But the problem is a lot of people of color don't know that. Right? There's a really big crisis on our hands when it comes to healthcare. And I'm going to talk about people of color first, but I have to talk about like white people as a collective. You guys haven't really been honest about the situation in America that white people are facing, unless you're like within the top 1%. And so first, like we have to be really honest about, look, America isn't working for us, right? Unless you're in the higher echelons of wealth, if you're middle class or poor, like you can't afford healthcare. Like your whiteness doesn't afford you as much privilege as they say it does, you know? Except for if you're a person of color. And so really, when we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about the situation that people of color are in healthcare, we have to be honest and being like, look, you know, the prevailing notion of the Affordable Care Act right now is that we need it and it's great and it's going away, we don't want that, but like we need to move to a different reality because it's not working for us either. And people of color are in a really unique situation. They always are, it's America, so that's how it works. But you first have to look at the legacy of healthcare when it comes to people of color. So you have to look at people like Henrietta Lacks and people like in the neighborhoods of Jamaica where I live in, where they're in some of the poorest economic conditions and then also some of the worst healthcare conditions. But why healthcare? Like, you know, when you think of Black Lives Matter, you don't really think of like healthcare. You don't think of any other ways that black people are disenfranchised. And I've traveled across the country, I've lived in New York for a while. And healthcare, Martin Luther King said it best, that healthcare is one of the most like horrible policies that you can put in for people of color. And he was actually right. You know, when you think of Black Lives Matter, you think of like institutional racism, you think of like police brutality. But in my work, I've realized that black people are like interconnected in the fact that we're being screwed over in each and every way. So when I say Black Lives Matter, I say that like we have to affirm that our lives matter in each and every institution that we're devalued here in this country. But also, you have to understand that like we can't carry this burden alone. You know, like the Affordable Care Act wasn't designed for us, it wasn't meant for us, and it won't save us. And so we're carried the burden of trying to move this forward. You know, anything that we've gotten has been on the backs of black and brown people. I truly believe we wouldn't be facing this like atrocity of our healthcare being taken away if we had the Voting Rights Act. All the protection's still there. And you know who fought for that? It was black and brown people. You know who were assassinated? It was black and brown people. And so first we have to be honest in the fact that America isn't working for us, but then really shifting the conversation to what a new reality is. Like we don't want to fight to go back to the days of the Affordable Care Act, to only if you were rich and white, come on, let's be real, if you were rich and white, we could have access to health care. But I'm actually like against, you know, the current policy of the Single Payer Health Care Act here in New York State, because I feel like it doesn't go far enough. You know, they're closing hospitals in areas that are where I live. The nearest hospital where I live is like a mile away. So you tell people about, hey, single payer healthcare, they're like, okay, that's great, how do I get it? You know, when I have to take a bus or I have to walk or like I need some transportation to get to these hospitals or these clinic centers, I can't actually access what is supposed to be a human right. So if I'm gonna put my people in the front lines, if I'm gonna knock doors, I have to have a wholehearted commitment. And because we're in such a crisis, there's no room for compromise anymore. We either fight for this all together or we don't get it done. Thank you.
As always, I learned from my brother. And the fact is, let's remind ourselves, and I think it's important to remind ourselves, Medicare for all is actually not a revolutionary demand. You don't have to understand the bigger fight in society to see that this is like step one. And so when we talk about healthcare justice, for some of us, this is like just leveling the playing field so that we can develop a movement for healthcare justice. And for some of us, a broader social justice movement, for sure. I'm feeding back, so I should not stand there. Okay, next up is Jen James, who is an organizer with the Democratic Socialists of America, and helped organize a canvassing campaign that collected 1,200 signatures for the New York Health Act in Marty Golden's district in South Brooklyn. She's the newly elected membership coordinator for the Socialist Feminist Work Group of DSA. and sees the fight for single payer as a great opportunity to build, and I quote here, and fully support working class power in the United States. Jen.
Thank you, guys. Kenneth is always such a hard act to follow. And I want to thank Katie for asking me to be on this really powerhouse of a panel. So, the Socialist Feminists of DSA took on the New York Health Act because A, it addresses all the intersections of poverty that we have to address as socialist feminists, and more specifically, because women tend to have higher healthcare costs and less access to healthcare. Right, so because we have uteruses and we have, reproduce, we tend to have higher than average healthcare costs. We go to the doctor more, we require more prescriptions, and we tend to make the healthcare decisions for our whole family. We're more likely to be responsible for the care work of nursing our older family members or our children. And because women are largely responsible for this unwaged social work or social labor, it means we are more likely to have to miss work, right, because our child is sick, or more likely to need a flexible schedule, which means that women are more likely to be underpaid and underemployed, and less likely to have a job that provides health care. Women are more likely to be dependent on their partner's health care insurance, which creates a difficult barrier when trying to leave abusive relationships, right? And you have to choose between your own personal safety and having health insurance for yourself and your children. Which is all to say, I'm a little disappointed that Planned Parenthood hasn't already endorsed this bill. And I'm so excited that we have a representative here. I can't find her, but have a representative from Planned Parenthood here. Because I would love to work with you to see how we can help push Planned Parenthood in the right direction. And I understand, right? Like, there are a lot of questions about what this bill will do and how it will be implemented. And Planned Parenthood is, frankly, very busy defending reproductive rights in an era that is extremely hostile to the organization. And the question of the Hyde Amendment is a very serious one, especially on the national level. For those of you who don't know, the Hyde Amendment says that no federal funds can be used for abortion. And in a national single-payer plan, that's a real concern, especially in conservative states, right? But it's not a problem in New York. As of right now, the New York State Medicaid program pays for abortions, even though it gets federal funds, right? It puts aside state funding in order to pay for abortions. And so there's an easy workaround to the Hyde Amendment. And so hopefully in the 2018 session, we can get an endorsement from Planned Parenthood, because I think it would be a major win for us. But more broadly, women have a very strategic role in this fight, right? Nurses, of course, have been leading the charge for single payer for years, and that's an occupation that employs mostly women. And same with home health aides, social workers, and other healthcare providers tend to be a lot of women. And so we have to use these women and their unions, right, as Judy says, to push for this fight. But even outside of the healthcare industry, women, and particularly women of color, have some of the highest rates of unionization of any demographic, right? And that's because some of the highest unionized sectors are teachers, nurses, government employees, which all employ women of color, have a large constituency of women of color. And the service industry, nobody talks about the service industry in regards to healthcare, but not only are these low-wage workers who are less likely to have access to healthcare, but it's also the latest hotbed of union organizing. And you know what? Service industry employs a lot of women of color. And so, as we fight for the New York Health Act, we need to be organizing women and people of color. These are the people who have the least access to healthcare and would face the greatest gains if we had single payer. I just want to emphasize, I forget if you kind of said this or not, but the healthcare organizing is made up of predominantly white people. And we need to change that, right? Like, we need to be empowering the working class, everybody in the working class, to take back these changes for themselves, because that's how we build power, and that's how we build a fight and a movement that is larger than just single payer. Because single payer is not the end goal, right? It's still putting money and profit in the hands of private corporations, whether that's through prescriptions or medical devices or private hospitals. So it is not the end. Does not, as we like to say in socialism, decommodify the whole healthcare industry, right? And so until we get profit fully out of the healthcare industry, you're still going to see these inequalities that Kenneth talked about. And so, just to wrap up, I just want to say, I hope we focus on organizing with all unions, right? And not just the medical health unions, because healthcare should not be a bargaining chip on the contract table. It should be a human right.
Yeah.
Next up is Nadina Laspina, who has been involved with PNHP for at least 10 years and has been active in the disability rights movement for about 40 years, practically from its start. She's been arrested countless times for civil disobedience. She's worked with Disabled in Action and with ADAPT. With her husband, Danny Roberts, she founded the End Medicaid Enforced Poverty Coalition and the Disability Caucus of Occupy Wall Street. And she's been leading the fight to have long-term care covered under New York Health. Nadina Laspina.
I'll just move forward a little bit. Okay, I'm wearing an ADAPT shirt, though I was not one of those disabled people that you saw on TV throwing themselves out of their chairs and being dragged out of McConnell's office in handcuffs. My luck, after being arrested at least 50 times and being roughed up by the police, badly at times, I couldn't go to Washington, D.C. last month, so I missed out on all the fame and glory that ADAPT finally got after 30 years of doing the same thing over and over, because ADAPT is the very best at doing civil disobedience. No organization of non-disabled people could ever compete with ADAPT, believe me. We're fighting to save Medicaid. I'd rather go to jail than die without Medicaid, they were chanting. Why? Because Medicaid is the single payer for long-term care. Medicare doesn't cover long-term care, as Maria reminded us. Private insurance doesn't either, unless you have long-term private insurance. So Medicaid is the program that covers the services and supports that those activists that you saw on TV need, like somebody to get them washed and dressed, get them out of bed and into their wheelchairs, services that should be ours by right. All of you in this room please understand that those kind of services should be ours by right. Are you thinking right now, isn't Medicaid for the poor? Sure, it is. Luckily, a whole lot of disabled people are poor. Yes, I'm being sarcastic when I say luckily. If they weren't poor to start with, they had to impoverish themselves. I know you heard some of those activists saying they work. Young Stephanie Woodward saying she's a lawyer. Yes, it's true, but they have to do financial acrobatics in order to stay eligible for Medicaid. Put their money into special needs trusts. Let a trustee be in control. If we live in New York State, then we're lucky because New York State has a Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities. As long as your earnings are not over $61,332. What if you're offered a job that pays $65,000 a year? I was a college professor. I didn't qualify. It's not like college teachers make a lot of money, but is that fair? Why shouldn't disabled people live up to their full potential, earn as much money as they're capable of earning? And why should senior citizens, when they start needing assistance with personal care, after working hard all their lives, impoverish themselves or give thousands and thousands to lawyers to figure out ways they can leave some money to their children and grandchildren and still qualify for Medicaid? And we're lucky that New York State allows that. If we live in New York State, we're also lucky because unlike many other states, New York State Medicaid has a good program of home and community-based services and supports. So we're less likely to end up in a nursing home. ADAPT has been trying since 1996 to get legislation passed that will remove what we call the institutional bias. What's that? Federal Medicaid mandates states to provide services in institutional settings, but not in your own home. That's optional. That's up to the states. And many states find it easier to just put people in nursing homes. The bill ADAPT is trying to pass today is called the Disability Integration Act. It was introduced by Chuck Schumer in the Senate and by a Republican, Sensenbrenner. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, from Wisconsin in the House. ADAPT always tries to be bipartisan. What makes this bill different from past ones is that it's not just a Medicaid bill. It doesn't say you're going to have to change this in the Medicaid law. All programs, government and private, must prioritize home-based services over institutionalization. You can find out about the Disability Integration Act if you go to Disability Integration Act, or one word, .org. So shouldn't long-term care be a right like healthcare is a right? Yet, all of you in this room are fighting to get a bill passed that does not really cover long-term care. The best it does is say that within 2 years, the New York Health Board has to come up with a plan that will have to be legislated and then signed by the governor. And that's after many years ago, and Medicaid enforced poverty, that was me and my husband leading, organized a disruption at a city event such as this one, and confronted Dick Gottfried, who happens to be my assembly member. Because as originally written, New York Health totally left out people who needed long-term care. Tough luck, out of pocket or be eligible for Medicaid. After many protests, Gottfried in 5 years. More protests, and he changed it to 2 years. Last year I got excited when Len Rothberg over there and Henry Moss over there of the NHP wrote a long-term care proposal to be included with New York Health. I painstakingly, made changes and suggestions to the proposal. My goal being that services presently available through New York State Medicaid, which I said, as far as states go, New York State is good and New York State Medicaid is pretty generous. I wanted to make sure they would remain the same. Yes, in New York City, for example, we have many people receiving 24 hours, 7 days a week of community home and community-based services and supports. And I wanted to make sure that all that would change for those people was that they no longer had to recertify for Medicaid, no longer had to worry about their income or resources being too high. Then under New York Health, they would get all the services that they needed by right. My changes have not been incorporated into the proposal. I want Len and Henry to promise that they will be. Can I see you?
Dick Godfrey's fault, it's not ours.
It's Dick Godfrey's fault. In fact, when he reintroduced the bill the wording had not been changed at all. And I want all of you to pressure Godfrey. Really. Please, pressure Godfrey. He keeps promising the next bill he will introduce will cover long-term care, but then it doesn't. Do not, I beg of you, do not support a bill that leaves people out. That's not a true single-payer bill. And please do support the Disability Integration Act so that no matter what form our health care will have in the future, and I do hope and I do believe that it will be single-payer, no one will have to worry about being institutionalized against their will. Thank you very much.
Tough act to follow. Max Hadler, however, is up to the challenge. Max is the New York Immigration Coalition's Senior Health Policy Manager and works on a wide range of issues to improve health access and coverage and delivery for immigrant communities. He's worked in many capacities related to access to care for immigrants, and I'm not going to list them all. And he holds a master's in public health from UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, a master's in Latin American Studies from UCLA, and a bachelor's from Wesleyan. So, Max Hadler.
Thanks for having me. It's kind of nice to go last to demonstrate my first point, which is that immigrants in New York and immigrants anywhere are by no means a monolithic community. Immigrants are people of color, they are union members, they are people with disabilities, they are seniors, they are women. And to the extent that different immigrant groups fall into all of those different categories, they reflect their concerns about single payer and their support for single payer are really contingent upon all the things that you've already heard from the other speakers, which is also to give myself permission to talk about the thing that really makes a specific group of immigrants, which is also not monolithic at all, unique in this and in many other cases related to healthcare and public benefits, which is undocumented immigrants and the over 430,000 people in New York State who are uninsured currently as a result of their immigration status. So why are there so many uninsured, undocumented people in New York State? One reason is that they're not eligible for pretty much any public benefit, particularly related to comprehensive health coverage. But another reason, and this really speaks a lot to single payer and the idea of replacing an employer-sponsored system, is that the vast majority of undocumented immigrants are employed. They're actually more likely to be employed than US citizens, but they're employed in industries and businesses that don't provide them with health insurance. And it's not necessarily because of their immigration status per se, it's because they work in construction industry and in service industries that don't provide insurance to their workers. And so the New York Health Act provides a really eloquent solution to this issue, and does so for everyone regardless of immigration status, as long as you can prove that your primary place of abode is the technical term that's in the bill right now. Regardless of status, then you qualify for the New York Health Act. That's a very salient point for approaching immigrant communities in New York State. We have a handful of different proposals that would incrementally improve health coverage for immigrant New Yorkers, and I'll talk about one of them in a minute. But clearly the New York Health Act is the most comprehensive and universal coverage option that's ever been proposed for immigrant communities. And so I think this idea of universality and using terms about universality and about non-discrimination and about not restricting based on immigration status are really, really important in talking about this with immigrant communities. The discrimination piece of it is not exclusive to immigration status, but it is a very important part of it, and it's a very important part of talking about single-payer healthcare as universal healthcare for communities that are very accustomed to being excluded from just about everything. I think it's also really important to speak to the specific types of benefits that people would draw in increased access to specific types of services. So there's actually a wonderful, somewhat framed but wonderful safety net that provides a lot of health services to immigrant New Yorkers, and particularly immigrants in New York City, like the health and hospital system, but across the state, in public hospitals, in community health centers, in Planned Parenthood. But the vast majority of those don't address in a comprehensive enough way access to behavioral health services, access to specialty care, access to dental care, access to vision care. These are all very specific services that when we work with the immigrant communities we work with, they highlight as really, really, really severe needs that they just don't have access to. They have access to primary care. This myth that undocumented immigrants are flooding emergency rooms because it's the only place they go, it is in fact a myth. But beyond primary care, beyond the types of services that you can get at a community health center or at a place like Planned Parenthood or at Health and Hospitals or at Westchester County Medical Center, there's a real issue with access for a lot of immigrants, and especially undocumented immigrants, and driving home those points as part of advocacy around the New York Health Act, I think are really important. And then beyond what the specific messages are, I think this is important for anyone, but it's particularly important for undocumented immigrants, for immigrant communities overall, and particularly in this moment, is that the messenger matters just as much as the message itself. There is an extraordinary amount of distrust in immigrant communities right now because of the political moment that we're living in, and if you don't feel like you're the right messenger, or you're not sure if you're the right messenger, then there are a lot of really good messengers. The New York Immigration Coalition can help you find them. Make the Road New York, any number of organizations across the state. And we are a statewide organization. We have nearly 200 member organizations, and 75 of them are outside of New York City. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an immigrant rights group. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone from the specific community, although that certainly would be ideal. But really thinking through who the right messenger is to try to, spread the gospel of the New York Health Act, and also recognize some of its limitations in terms of the fact that it's not going to resolve structural racism and discrimination and the discrimination that exists between, for example, the New York City Health and Hospitals public system and the hospitals, the private academic medical centers that sit alongside of them. That's a much longer term issue. Bringing that message through the right channels is really, really critical, and so I would offer the New York Immigration Coalition's services in making sure that we find the right messengers for those things, in finding, for example, community health workers, and making sure that existing models of providing information to immigrant communities are baked into the New York Health Act. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge sort of advocacy 101. It seems too far forward thinking to think about how this is going to be implemented before it's actually been passed. But if you don't think about how it's going to be implemented, then you don't really have a proposal that's going to go anywhere. And so in terms of implementation with immigrant communities, there's a lot of things that will be resolved with the New York Health Act through universal coverage. But there are a lot of things that won't be resolved in terms of people's actual access to services if we don't think about really extraordinary amounts of funding and attention towards outreach and education and helping folks understand what it is that this does differently about accessing the health system, and then once it's in place, actually helping people navigate the health system. You know, navigators are something that have existed for a long time. They've been propped up by the Affordable Care Act. It's one of the amazing things of the Affordable Care Act, and it's something that has to be a part of any healthcare system because, you know, putting into a bill that there's no discrimination based on immigration status doesn't actually, in and of itself, increase someone's access to health services. It increases their access to health coverage. So then, just one last point. I mentioned before that there are some other efforts related to expanding immigrant health coverage in New York State. We have a campaign called Coverage for All. I'm not raising it here as a PSA for Coverage for All. I'm raising it because there are existing spaces that are pushing forward companion efforts really to the New York Health Act to improve access to care, or to coverage in this case, for immigrant New Yorkers. And the idea behind this, PNHP was, I think, actually the first organization to endorse the Coverage for All campaign. If we can get coverage for young adult immigrants, then we slowly raise the floor upon which we're standing to then continue to work towards passing the New York Health Act. And so we have, this campaign focuses exclusively on how best to do outreach and advocacy with and on behalf of immigrant New Yorkers, and particularly undocumented immigrant New Yorkers. And so to the extent that we have lessons that we're learning from all of these outreach efforts, from thinking about how this would actually be implemented if it came to pass, are all very relevant to the campaign for New York Health. And I think there's probably examples of this with other campaigns that exist, whether they're related to healthcare or not, in terms of actually being intersectional across areas and also across campaigns, in terms of not needing to reinvent wheels, not needing to think about how best to reach out to immigrant communities with a message about the campaign for New York Health, because it's probably very, very similar to the messages that we're using in something like Coverage for All. Thanks.
So I just want to summarize that I think the value of this panel is that, and what we got, because frankly, I could listen to any one of these speakers for, we could have an hour session at least on the particular issues facing particular segments of the population. Max has reminded us that some of us are members of a number of these different constituencies. We're women, we're working people, we're people of color, we're people living with disabilities, we're seniors, who do we know? We're union members. Got it? Okay, so that's true, and we're all in this together. It's also true that we need to recognize, as Max also said, who's the best messenger? Who among us? We know we're working together in a broad coalition. And that's the value, I think, of this session, is just to, we are all in this together. So we have about 30 seconds for Q&A. If anybody's got an urgent question, now would be your time. Henry.
Just a quick follow-up to what Nadina was talking about. Later on, we're going to talk about constituencies and tactics. There's an entire world out there of family caregiver organizations that support family caregiving, national and regional. There's an entire group of organizations out there that support home health workers and home care workers and their unions. Right now, they are passive in their support for single payer because long-term care hasn't really been put on their desk where they can actually integrate that into their political activity. And we're talking ARC, we're talking Alzheimer's Association. There's all kinds of organizations who would become positive, strong supporters of the New York Health Act, I believe, if in fact we brought the long-term care issue. I'm lobbying a little bit here, but that's an important tactical issue.
Thank you. Just a question about the legislation itself. I just don't, I'm a little unfamiliar with it. So what I want to know is why so much resistance to including the long-term care issue in the legislation? Why is that such a bone of contention for that?
Okay, well, somebody mentioned Maria mentioned $31 billion of unpaid care being done by family members who are leaving jobs or cutting back their hours, and what basically making a huge economic contribution to long-term care. There's some fear of what's called woodwork effects, that this would now become a budget issue that would run out of control. We're working now on documenting, providing evidence and documentation that in fact that would not occur, or at least it would not occur at the scale that people are afraid of. In Europe, most of the countries that have universal health care do not have universal long-term care. There's cost sharing, there's eligibility requirements, and so on and so forth. It's one of those issues where nobody wants to touch the fact that families are providing so much care to disabled and to elderly that they're afraid that that's an expense that they may not be willing to take on. So that's one of the reasons.
Thanks. Thank you.
One thing that I would like to warn you about, give you a loving warning. Adopt is pissed off at groups pushing for universal health care because of their resistance to sign on to the Disability Integration Act or integrate LGSS into the healthcare bills. And do expect resistance. Think about the optics. If people with disabilities do counter protests for you, against you, think about what that would do to your efforts. I just wanted to get that warning out, not because I'm threatening you, but because people are already talking about it within the organization. So take this very, very seriously. New York has one of the largest ADAPT groups in Rochester. They will come down, they will fight, they are ready to fight, so be prepared.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple words, because I think a couple of hands mentioned a really good question about just because you get healthcare coverage doesn't mean you get healthcare access. And I think that I deal with that very, very closely because I'm a nurse at a city hospital where people get coverage, but how much access they get depends on how robust our hospital system is and how much care we can provide, either through staffing or through our resources. One of the debates that's come up, or one of the discussions that's come up is how single payer will impact that. And I can just tell you one way. It's one of the reasons that public systems are getting so downscaled is because of the Medicaid doesn't reimburse enough to provide care. And so that's what's actually putting economic pressure on downscale. If the single reimbursement mechanism was Medicaid, you could actually see an expansion of public health care services because those institutions will be able to afford to provide that health care. Medicare, sorry. The Medicaid, so basically we mentioned in the previous session, like for every Medicaid patient, a healthcare institution loses 15%. For every Medicare patient, the system breaks about even. And for every private insurance, the system makes about 15%. So depending on, and so if you had everybody with Medicare, then everybody would be able to break even and be able to provide costs. So I think that addresses some of the coverage question. It doesn't resolve the racial and different inequalities in the institutional systems that exist beyond that. But it does address it to a certain extent that I think I just wanted to throw out there.
I just wanted to say something that nobody was really saying here is, we're not looking at the fact that insurance companies, we have 30, 40 insurance companies alone in New York State that take up fully, 20, 25% of payments right off the top, and it's not for healthcare. It's basically to do their administration and their ads and, all their executive pays. So, so if we, when you see that Medicare only has a 2% overhead cost, 2 to 5% overhead cost, all of that money would be shifted into healthcare, and that would be a much better way, and we would have a lot more and better coverage. Because the other thing is, what we're seeing is the denials of healthcare, from these insurance companies denying people care, which, the last I checked, a health insurance company doesn't know what's really wrong with the patient, except that they have a bottom line that they need to satisfy. And so one thing that in these discussions that we're having, the one thing that nobody is really addressing are the insurance companies for whatever reason.
Trust us, we do all the time. You know what I'm really hearing, I think we've really kind of run out of time in this session, but what I'm hearing is, and something that we really need to think about, is this is the first step, folks, toward healthcare justice. This is not even close to what we mean by healthcare justice. And Ken addressed those issues, and Jen addressed those issues, and Dina addressed those issues. Everybody on the panel has addressed those issues, and we know that, and I've been knowing that since I got into this movement, that this is really, as I always put it this way, frankly, this is not only not revolutionary, it's a modest reform, is all it is. It really is a modest reform, one step on the longer road to healthcare and societal justice.
And knocking out the health insurance companies, they ain't modest. That would be massive.
Also, paying for long-term care or rehabilitative care or family caregivers, that issue is not a radical new revolutionary issue. Anyone who works in a facility knows that patients who used to get that care, whether it was institutional or not, was provided by the medical system. Nurses and nursing aides and others used to provide that care. Now people are shoved out of the hospital without that care being provided, and families, I never thought it would come to the day where I had to show a family how to suction a tracheostomy or insert a Foley. That was something done by caregivers, and the old medical system did provide for that. Just like in mental health care, when there was a trend and an understanding to deinstitutionalize certain care, although I think in the medical part that has been outrageously overdone. But say for mental health care, that people would be then sent to their homes, to halfway houses, they would provide this wonderful care in our communities. What happened was everybody's kicked out of the hospitals and nothing was provided. So that's why you have so many people who are mentally ill in prisons or homeless, and that's why you have people so sick coming back to the hospital, because families cannot take on that care. So the concept of long-term care shouldn't be seen as something new. It was provided, it just got destroyed. And I think that's an important point when we're fighting for that.
Okay, we're at the end of our time for this section, and so thank you very much. I'll turn this back over to Katie.
So, folks, we have a really important announcement, and Jen is going to fill us in on some recent news.
So I apologize, this is a little off topic, but for any of you who have been following the events in Charlottesville, where there has been a massive white supremacist rally with a large counter-protest, it has just been confirmed that one counter-protest has died, and several people are hurt. I think 2 DSA members specifically have been hit by a car and are on the hospital. Yeah, so there will be a solidarity rally at Union Square after this. I think it starts at 4. I'm going straight there after this, and I hope I will see you there. And I was just hoping if we could have a moment of silence for those who died and are hurt. Thank you very much.
So the fights are very real, and we are behind on the agenda, but really, really excellent meeting so far, and we're going to take a 5-minute break. There's snacks, there's coffee, there's bathrooms to the left and right, and then we're going to come back together for a plenary panel on tactical ways to move forward. Thank you, everyone. Our folks are going to speak very briefly to the kind of tactics that they've developed so that people are aware of the resource and who it is who's been really pushing that resource. So Ethan is up. I think Rafi should be up here. Rafi is in the room.
Yeah.
Hi, come on up, Rafi. If anyone else was planning to speak on the tactical panel, we're just going to have very quick updates from folks. I think we're good. Okay, so the first person we're going to have speak. Okay, so this panel is going to be on different tactics, and the idea behind it was just that certain groups have been doing, different things that other groups might not be aware of. So this is kind of just to give you like a menu of available tactics that you might think about employing. So each of these people is going to talk about a tactic that their group has employed. They're just going to say what the tactic is, maybe 1 or 2 lessons learned, and then how to find more information about how to implement the tactic. And we're going to compile these all into a list, and so the resources that we send out after the meeting, it'll include all of these, how to contact them, and additional places to find resources. Yeah, so you don't have to take notes. You can if you want to, but all the information will be sent out after. All right, so first up we have Ling. Don't check.
Hey, I'm Ling. I'm working on 1,000 businesses for the New York Health Act initiative. We're hoping to have 1,000 businesses endorsing the campaign by January at the start of the legislative session, so that hopefully we happen to have a press conference that we have some business owners that can speak to why they support it. And that's mostly because our main opposition is, some of our main opposition is that it's not good for business, but if we show that all these businesses support it, and that helps us make some headway. So you can come and see me, or you can email me, and we're going to have trainings and a toolkit set up so that anyone, anywhere, you can set up your own canvassing, go out with your friend on a Sunday afternoon, or maybe not a Sunday afternoon, but we'll have a bunch of tools for you to use in order to do that on your own, or with us.
Any more? Careful. Yeah, you can actually come around this way because there's a big cord for you to jump on. Just stand over here as opposed to there.
Hi, my name is Judy Esterquist, and I've been working with a team to do letters to the editor.
Could you speak into the microphone?
My name is Judy Esterquist, and I've been working with a team to do letters to the editor for papers across New York. Basically focused on strategic Senate districts, but we're trying to cover the state too. What this means is that we would have letters written as much as we could to every paper, every week. What happens is the senators will notice their names in letters. They notice local media. Your neighbors will see that people support it. Your neighbors will learn cool things about the New York Health Act. It's an easy way to educate people because local papers are like gossip. However, the numbers are a tiny bit daunting. In my district, there are 30 weekly newspapers. If we want 1 letter a week for 20 weeks between January and June, and we think once you get published, you have to wait 6 or 8 weeks, we may need 200 or 300 people in order to make that happen. However, if you break it down, you have 20 people for each weekly, and you have a captain who kind of organizes them, and you have letter writing parties, you can do it. So I think, I have half my district, I think, underway, and most districts don't have 30 weeklies. So here's what I'd like from you. I would like you to sign up at New York Health Act if you haven't, sign up for letters, and there's I can't give you the website, but there's a letters volunteering piece of it. And we will, and When you sign up, if you can put down what are the media, what are the weeklies that are around you, because I have no idea for outside my district, and whether you would be willing just to write 3 or 4 letters in 6 months, or would you champion a group of 20 people, which means go out and ID them and organize them, so that each weekly only gets 2 or 3 letters submitted a week. Okay, so that's what we'd like. So that's what it is. Thanks.
Thanks, Judy. And there is a blue pledge form in your packet, so you can actually be noting activities that you're willing to take on, which will be talked about on the panel in my will. And so you'll be plugged into any of these resources that you mentioned. Julie, you're up. Don't see him right. Yeah. No, don't.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I'm Julie from Uptown Progressive Action, and I want to talk about house parties. House parties are a very personal way to reach out in an intimate setting to people, and we're trying to reach new people and invite new people, introduce them to the New York Health Act, and hopefully get them as activists and maybe starting to give their own house parties as one being activists. So hosts invite their friends and families and neighbors and co-workers, and maybe send out an invitation and say something like, "Help me snacks for the New York Health Act," and bring people in. There are a lot of different ways to structure it. One would be just a very short info session, followed by a considerably longer Q&A and telling the healthcare stories, and we listen to the healthcare stories and more Q&A and more responses. My notes? Yeah, okay. The end of it is one of the most important parts where we talk to people about getting involved. And so they give them the bill summaries because some of them have absolutely never heard of the New York Health Act. We have them sign an email list, check a box if they want to get involved. If they live near us, they get involved with us. If they live near you, we connect them to you. And everybody works together in these kind of mushroom, and there are more and more house parties. And we're doing this in various parts of the community. We're having some Spanish-speaking house parties as well. We're also building a house party team, and that's where I think some of you might be interested in getting involved with us. So let us know. The house party team would be speaking at house parties, and we would be happy to invite you to any of ours so you see what we do. You can invite us to yours, and we look forward to organizing with you and doing this kind of serious party together. Thank you.
I like the idea of parties. So, advertising, not a nasty word. I'm not talking mass marketing, but targeted and local. Think very local. I'll give you 3 examples. Your local community or university or college radio station. They'll probably give you a PSA spot for nothing. They'll probably help you even record it, and they'll put you on their calendar. Number 2, Facebook. You've probably heard of that. They have a very highly targeted system of ads you can do for very little money. You can turn on and off whenever you want. You can run it, let's say, 5 days before an event. Best of all, it of course gives people a link. They can go right to your event page and sign up. Number 3, don't forget paper, your local newspaper. Costs a couple of bucks, but one of the good parts about doing that is that it gives you leverage to ask for editorials or reporting on your event. So those are the 3 things I got. Go get it. Oh, if you think of a new one, let us know.
I'm Ethan Felder. I'm with the co-founder of the Queen Solidarity Coalition. Following on what Katie was opening this meeting, this coalition came into existence after the inauguration. Just myself and relatively few other people just wanting to do as much as we can in a public, concerted, big way to resist Trump and all that's happening. So the first action that this coalition did was a solidarity rally, which in the course of 20 days brought close to 1,000 people in Queens to a park in Forest Hills, a unity, solidarity, anti-hate rally. So in that moment, I never felt closer to my neighbors there, and there was quite a lot of coverage, media attention, elected officials there. It was quite a remarkable display of power of grassroots organizing and the power that we all have by being here in this room together and what we can all do, just not very many of us. After that rally, the coalition turns its attention to healthcare, something that's important to me. I'm a big proponent of universal healthcare myself, but it was the first time that I heard about the New York Health Act. We embarked, just a few people, partnering with a few organizations like nyha and PNHB on a borough-wide healthcare town hall series from Jackson Heights to Flushing to Jamaica. And some of the learnings from that tactic of public town hall is, for each one, you want to have a specific goal in mind. For the first one in Jackson Heights, we ended the action with everyone in the room taking time to call a member of Congress to support the ACA, which I thought was very powerful and in line with the advocacy portion of the action. The other wisdom that I would impart, and myself being so new to this, I don't feel equal to the task of imparting wisdom, I must say humbly, is the need to pressure and engage and even demand that our elected officials in positions of leadership who are supportive of single-payer or healthcare reform generally, to not just take part in our grassroots actions, but be leading the way and getting their constituents and using their pulpit, their bully pulpit and the power of their offices to engage people in our movement and to really put their full weight behind it. It's always, controversial. My opinion from seeing this up close is that it's essential. And with that, I'm happy to answer anyone who wants to talk about what I've talked about so far afterwards. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Rafi. I'm the founder of Progressive Coders Network and Progressive Hack Night, and wanted to talk to you about Action Blitz. So I've been organizing 1,000 strong programmers and different technology professionals. So one thing that we've learned is that these folks really want to do something, and the way we organize them is we created specific asks for them in terms of what are the issues that we're experiencing. So if you need help in terms of building that kind of outreach for professionals, please talk to me. One thing that we learned through the process is how important personal stories are. So I've been creating a map for Katie where we are mapping all the stories throughout New York. So it really helps us a lot if you reach out and provide stories to PNHB and New York Campaign for Health. Right now we only have 8, I think, or 10. But we have like 53 in on-stack, which is great. But we need more because it really colors the map in terms of the needs of people. We have been creating a lot of healthcare calculators and maps, and we would love to get your input there as well. One thing that I would like to offer is if you have issues with your organization or ways that you think technology can help, we have a pitch night on August 29 in ThoughtWorks here in Manhattan. We are focused on just learning more about your problem and how can technologists help out in that issue. Yeah, it's more about having a clear ask to technologists or reach out to those who can communicate with technologists. I think Ling and I, please approach us anytime because we know how to translate your language to programmers. So that's a really important thing that is, I think we learned because there's a lot of disconnect between technologists and the organizers, so we're here to help.
Hi, I'm Jeff Michelson. I'm the chair of the Healthcare Committee for Grassroots Action New York. And in fact, you come here and activate as direct lobbying your legislators. So one of the issues, in addition to healthcare, our group has been working on voter reform, and my most recent experience with this is actually on voter reform. We met with my Assemblyman Gottfried and my Senator Brad Hoylman, both of which are already great on these issues, but it was incredibly fruitful, not only because it reinforces some of the views they already have on these issues, but because it brings to light things that they don't even know about. They didn't know about some of the bills that were in front of the legislature. They didn't even know that they weren't sponsoring some of them, and we got free in one case to sponsor it while we were still there, got online. So it's so worthwhile doing it, even if you know that they're on board. And one of the takeaways I'm getting from today's gathering is that I need to go back to Dick Godfrey and really push him on long-term care, among other things, probably Brad Wellman as well. But a couple of things I would recommend if you guys do this: get a group of constituents together. You know, not a huge group, 20. I think we had about 7 or 8 in each case. But do some preparation work before you go in. We did a rehearsal call where we came up with a game plan, and we assigned specific tasks to members of people who were coming to research particular bills and being able to do a presentation on them. And then both of the meetings went really well. If you want more information on this, actually the NYPAN website has a video that has some lobby training advice, or you can contact me at jeff@grassrootsactionnewyork.com, and I can point you in the right direction. Thank you.
I'm Helen Krim from Women's March Alliance. We were a group of 30 women who volunteered. There was our leader, Catherine Samienko, put a GoFundMe out on the internet, and I saw it shortly after the election, and I said, I want to be in on this, and I volunteered. And we were the architects of the march that occurred on January 21st. The Alliance has decided, because we are new, we are applying for the 501(c), and that's in process. We are expert in social media. That is where our strength is. We managed somehow to communicate this march out to 750,000 New Yorkers in 6 weeks. So they know what they're doing that way. I'm not one of the technical gurus at all. However, I'm enthusiastic. So what we're doing is forming coalitions with other groups to amplify their voice. Anyone who is interested, I have a meeting next week with League of Women Voters, because we are involved with trying to register 1 million women by the 2018 election and have them able to vote. We are 52% women in the population, and we should have more people representing us in Congress. When I was first, we were talking about direct action, I didn't know what was meant. So the thought I had in mind, the most fun thing I did was a die-in. We put out the word to a number of the groups that we work with, Rise and Resist, and Rock the Vote, and a number of others. And we all assembled in Foley Square with gravestones. Everybody got a poster of some kind that they put on, rest in peace. I got kicked out of a nursing home. And we had people tell stories, and that to me was one of the most moving and inspiring parts of it. There were 2 women who had been died. One woman had cancer and had recovered. She's 27 years old. But if the ACA goes away, she'll never have insurance. So anybody who is interested in amplifying the voice of your group, getting your actions out on the web, through Twitter, through Facebook, and that kind of thing, get in touch with me, and I'll take the information, put it into, and get our experts who actually know how to do that, and they will advertise it for you.
Hi,
My name is Sean with the New York State Nurses Association. I guess I just wanted to start by, kind of reiterating some of the things that other people had said in terms of how exciting this moment is right now, which is kind of ironic because we're living under Donald Trump, and how devastating. I mean, I just want to echo the sentiment from the brother from the New York Immigration Coalition, which is that I say exciting, but I say that with a huge caveat, which is that many communities across the city and across this country are living in terror and fear, and are facing the most dire circumstances. But it is exciting in the way that we have seen resistance to the policies of our president come into being in ways that I don't think any of us could have anticipated when we found out the news in November. And I actually, I think I credit the Women's March for actually kicking that process off on day one of the inauguration and organizing one of the largest marches in U.S. history. And I think that set the tone for the subsequent protests around the airport protests, around immigration bans, and a range of other actions that have happened. So I think shouting down centrist Democrats for their lack of support for single payer, things like the Pilgrim Pipeline and things like that. And I think that there's a real moment, there's a spontaneity and an interest that exists in such a widespread way right now. And I think the challenge for us is how do we build the capacity of our movement? How do we tap into that? How do we reach out to that? And I just wanted to throw, it's a big build up to, I just wanted to throw out an idea about how we can do that in New York State, but also New York State as part of a national movement. And that is, I think that actually we should consider the idea of a national single payer march on Washington.
Yes.
And I think that could help. I think and there's been debates in different circles around this question. I've been to mass marches that have changed my life, and I've been to mass marches that have been like, that was okay, but it was disappointing. We obviously don't want the national march of the 4,000 people, where we spent 6 months devoting tons of time and energy into it. But I think right now there's a moment to build such a powerful and inspiring march that actually, the goal of which, from our perspective, I think, is to reinforce the efforts in New York State, is to help that build capacity in our fight in New York State. And I'll give you 2 examples of how I think that can do that. One is that I'm also involved in climate justice work in my organization, and we have a climate justice committee. And it wasn't until this year's, that's been a process of building up over a long period of time. It wasn't until mobilizing for this year's People's Climate March in Washington, D.C., that our committee was really able to set up some of the infrastructure within our organization that actually was able to reach out different corners that we hadn't reached out to before. And we actually now have, our committee has doubled in size. We have been able to do double the amount of things at the local level now that we have actually organized for that national fight. So I think that to me, that really hammered home the point of actually how building for national marches can actually develop infrastructure and build capacity at local levels. The second is around the question of we need a major paradigm shift around single payer in this country, and that has to be dealt at the national level. We need an ideological shift, and we need an organizational shift around single payer. And I think that there's a number of ways in which a national march helps make that happen. If it's large enough, it can actually be a lightning rod for having that debate all across the country. There are so many constituencies around this country that don't have a state single payer fight to get involved in that can plug into this movement. And then Cuomo, who's running for a national office in 2 years, or in, 3 years, is, yeah, he's running, he's already running. He's going to have to pay attention to that. He's going to have, I think we need to think about how to hit Cuomo at all angles, on all sides. And I think that that's using a national march and a national energy to leverage against to leverage that against Cuomo and to re-energize our efforts here in New York State is one way to do it. And I think the timing is about right for that. I think that if we do it prior to when our New York State legislative session heats up in April and May of next year, I think that could really give us some, take advantage of the momentum that exists right now and carry that momentum into the fight in April and May of this year. So that's an idea I wanted to throw out. We can obviously, we'll be discussing that in the coming weeks and months.
Right on, thank you. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the concept of base building. As we've talked about today, there's a number of people that we want to reach with our message. And actually, it's not just about going out and talking at people about this bill, but talking to people about their experiences with healthcare. And from our amazing upstate coordinator, Ursula Razum, she's developed a healthcare survey that you can use as the basis for an organizing conversation. You go out and have these conversations one-on-one with people in your community. The survey is the green paper in your packet. There's some resources there about how you would conduct this. This is actually building to what will be a report in the spring, a snapshot of New Yorkers' experiences with healthcare, largely drawing out the kinds of things we've talked about today. How does a market-based healthcare system control your life, your marriage, through your job, through financial barriers to care if you can't access it because you can't afford it? And this is a key component of our talking point, which is the opposition will say we can't afford this bill. You saw in the presentation earlier that they'll say this quadruples your taxes, it will bankrupt the state. But the reality is that we can't afford the current system. And we need to emphasize these experiences in order to counter that. So Ursula has been leading trainings all over the state on how to do these kind of canvassing and survey tools, and we'd like to do more of that in New York City. So on that blue pledge form, you can check if you're interested in getting plugged into this. And that, we're at 4:30. We have 30 minutes left in the meeting. We're a bit off schedule, but we're going to get back into the breakout groups that we started with, the geographic breakout groups. So that's what we're doing now to continue the discussion on how we're going to move forward in our local context. Thank you so much, everybody.